Good evening, dear family. So let's see. So just a couple of things. First off, can you hear me? Is this a good volume? Even for those in the back? Okay, good. So thank you so much. So I've been getting some feedback, especially today, and just know I really appreciate that. And I know especially yesterday, I wasn't as loud as I could have been, so we'll just try different things to remedy that. And then so secondly, just for those of you who aren't quite aware of exactly what we're doing, so I understand with Lenten missions, it typically is within Mass. And so since I'm not a priest yet, as a seminarian, I just kind of tweaked a few things. So how we'll do it is that we'll have adoration for a whole hour from 6 to 7. And then during that time, Father Daniel will be in the back hearing confessions. And we'll have a bit of silent time for about 15 minutes or so. And then at that point, that's when I'll offer reflection. And tonight I'll be talking about conversion, exactly what that means. But then just in light of yesterday, I'll recap what I talked about yesterday for all of you. And then we'll take about half hour of personal prayer time of continued silence, and then wrap up a little before 7 o'clock with reposition. And then we'll pick it up again tomorrow. So hope that helps, and hope that we have a good evening this time. Thank you. Okay, let's try this again. So just before I want to go into our topic for this evening, I hope to just review briefly what I discussed yesterday, the interior life. You know, what it really comes down to, everyone, is this deep relationship with Jesus Christ, this love that we seek to imitate of him. You know, as human beings, it's so hard for us to, right? Because God's love is so infinite. It's so beyond our comprehension, beyond our natural ability. But that doesn't mean that we can certainly strive for it. We can draw closer to him. We certainly open our hearts, and by simply doing that, he does all the rest. And there's so many that we can look to as a great example. So we talked about the story of Martha and Mary, who we see two examples of what to do and what not to do. Mary was there at Jesus' feet, listening to him, taking in everything he had to say. And yet Martha was just so anxious, so worried about everything else going on, trying to be a good hostess, having a good intent. But Jesus making it very clear, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the good thing, and it will not be taken from her. And so we look to her. We look to our Blessed Mother, she who pondered everything in her heart at the moment of Christ's birth, at the moment of finding him in the temple, and just such great worry, anxiety, just as Martha felt in a way. But simply by the words of Jesus Christ, by him being God incarnate, Mary, she knows, she understands, but then still as the human being she is, she continues to ponder and to build that interior life. And then we understand too, it's all about the soul. It's about building up that soul, opening up for Jesus to work through us, because our struggle is not with flesh and blood, as St. Paul tells us. It's with the principalities, powers, world rulers of darkness. But we never let that cause fear in us, dear family, because Jesus is always at work in us. He is working through every single one of us, even in those very hard times in our lives. And it's Christ living in us who will always live in us. But again, he can certainly continue to live more deeply in us by seeking his will, seeking to love him as he loves us. And it's just a constant journey worth taking. And so I just wanted to kind of recap there. Tonight, what I really want to talk about is conversion. You know, we hear that and we speak about that a lot as Christians, turning back to the Lord, converting our hearts. And we also tend to think about it too as something when there's somebody who may not necessarily have the Christian faith, but just orients their whole lives radically to Jesus. A great example is the Centurion that we hear in the Gospels. He asked Jesus for the healing of his servant. And this Roman is a pagan. He doesn't believe in God, but he sees all the good that Jesus does. He sees the love he has for his people. And he says, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and my servant shall be healed. And it's certainly that same prayer we say at Mass every day, which is so beautiful, because it's a moment that we can convert ourselves. And that just shows a great example of that conversion. And so, in a sense, all of us are seeking conversion in our own lives, whether we have the deepest, greatest relationship with Jesus Christ, or we feel so far away from him. We're all in need of that. We're all in need of drawing closer to him. And so we can understand conversion to be a type of repentance. And we understand that to be the master theme of the Bible. I got that from Catholic Answers. I thought that was just a really good thing in defining it, the master theme of the Bible, because that's what Jesus always calls to us. He calls him to himself. And it is a continuous journey through the life of a Christian. And certainly at times very hard, dear family. I think for all of us, no matter what our vocation, no matter what our relationship with Jesus. But again, he continues to call us. He continues to stand at the door knocking and just inviting us to love him as he loves us. You know, it's perfect too that we're talking about conversion, because we also see in the Gospel of Luke, which we heard this weekend, the prodigal son, which I hope to read to you again and kind of parse out this aspect of conversion and exactly what we can get from that. So we hear in Luke's Gospel, Jesus said, a man had 2 sons, and the younger son said to his father, Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me. So the father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off to a distant country where he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he found himself in dire need. So he hired himself out to one of the local citizens who sent him to his farm to tend the swine. And he longed to eat his fill of the pods on which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat, but here am I dying from hunger. I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But his father ordered his servants, 'Quickly, bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fattened calf and slaughter it. Then let us celebrate with a feast. Because this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.' Then the celebration began. Now the older son had been out in the field, and on his way back he hadn't seen near the house. He heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what this might mean. The servant said to him, 'Your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound.' He became angry, and when he refused to enter the house, his father came out and pleaded with him. He said to his father in reply, 'Look, all these years I served you, and not once did I disobey your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughter the fattened calf.' He said to him, 'My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.'" You know, dear family, I think I certainly couldn't put it so much better than Father Christopher or Father Daniel this weekend. There's so much to this story, so much we can learn. Let us remember, dear family, all of us are the prodigal son. All of us are in need of turning back to the Father. But it's just simply that. We simply turn to him with our whole heart, our whole mind. And I think we tend to make it harder than it is because we have this inclination to sin. It's our human nature. And we certainly at the same time shouldn't feel guilty because even amidst that, we're made in God's image and likeness. We're made to be beautiful. And we are loved and we are lovable. And nothing we ever say, nothing we ever do will ever change that. But to really sit with that, I think, is a very tough thing. I think especially for us, going toward the priesthood, even priests themselves have a hard time with this because they want to live up to a good standard of living, want to live as Jesus lived. But we're still human beings, all of us are, regardless of our vocation. And we just see here simply that the prodigal son realizes what he's done and just goes to the Father. And we see just simply going to him, the Father embraces him, saying nothing, with no judgment, no condemnation, but just tremendous love. And so this is why we see to be such a central passage in all of the Bible and all of the Christian tradition. We can say, again, when we talk about conversion, that master theme. And again, though, family, we continue day by day. We be patient with ourselves because it's not like we can just do it right away. We can certainly have those radical moments as the prodigal son endured. But just because of our inclination to sin, our continued struggle against the principalities and powers, as St. Paul discusses, we continue on. We always have this continuous conversion in our lives, this continued turning to Jesus through the Eucharist, through the sacrament of confession, and simply through prayer too, dear family. Prayer is about, again, that relationship with Jesus, turning to him, listening to what he has to say. And he does the rest. And so looking to conversion and how I was speaking about the interior life last night, we understand that it's the interior life that can support what we call the active life. So living the good Christian life, and certainly to conversion, through that relationship with Jesus, through him working in us, he will convert our hearts. But again, it's about opening up to him, opening our hearts and our minds to him. And just by the greatness and the tremendous love he has for us, he does work through us, dear family, even in moments we may not really seem and think we are. But just Christ is in all things, is through all things, and with all things. And that includes us, and especially us, because we are made in his image and likeness. We see through others, through even certain circumstances, the most joyful, the most sorrowful, that God is speaking to us. And I think it's especially in those intense moments of joy, those intense moments of sorrow, that's when Jesus is speaking to us. That is when he's calling us to something deeper, to trust him, or to rejoice in him, to give thanks for the many blessings we're given, dear family. You know, how easy it is for us to kind of be caught up in our little worlds, caught up in our context here in Las Vegas, here in the United States. And yet, however many thousands of miles away, we have brothers and sisters who are dying from their faith, from persecution, and so many different things. And that's just one example. But again, at the same time, even for those people, as I said last night, we see everything as blessing. Because again, God is through it at all. He is with us. He is for us and will never be against us. And what he calls us to is to be for him. But he doesn't expect that we do it ourselves, that we take it in our own merit. It is through Christ. It is through the grace of the sacraments that it makes that possible. And it is through this conversion and in support with the interior life that the heart of Christ is cultivated in us. That sacred heart, that pure heart, that is possible for us, dear family. Again, even in the most sorrowful of times, in the moments where we feel so separated from God, whether we're caught up in sin or we just don't feel his presence, we can look to so many people who knew what that was like, to saints, even our Blessed Mother herself. And just such a tremendous example of her, because through the passion, through everything, all the suffering Christ endured, she was silent. She pondered in her heart, and she herself was cultivating an immaculate heart because she had that interior life. She pondered everything that was enduring in her life. Again, those joys, those joyful moments she had with her son, our Lord Jesus Christ. But in those sorrowful moments, especially at the cross, to see your own son die for what apparently was for no reason, but it was for the most important reason, our salvation. And then through this, we can look to her because she had a comfortable sense of self. And that will help us to have a better knowledge of ourselves, knowing how beloved we are, how lovable we are, and then how we can turn to God. You know, if anything, this Lent, this is precisely the purpose of what we talk about a lot in Lent, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. It's about that continuous conversion, praying through that relationship with Jesus Christ, fasting through entering into, in a small way, the sacrifice that he endured for us, his ultimate sacrifice. And then almsgiving, by giving to others, loving others as Jesus loves us. And again, dear family, we're not meant to do it alone. We can do it through the grace of Jesus Christ. We can help each other by loving each other, supporting one another, living our vocations as Christians. And just simply by that, that conversion will take place, that radical turning. And even in the moments where we may seem to be in a good place with God, he still calls us to draw ever closer to him. Because we will never understand the beauty, the bliss, and even those words don't describe just the joys of heaven that await us, dear family. We continue to draw closer to him. We continue to convert our hearts to him. And just know that we can do it together as a family, united as a family. And this is precisely why the devil causes this division in our world and our society. because he knows if we're united, we will help each other to convert. We will help each other to love Christ and to live the gospel message. And so again, dear family, as I said, continue to be patient with yourselves. Just know how loved you are, how lovable you are. Nothing will ever change that. And so as I conclude, I offer some reflection for this last half hour of prayer. Just continuing off of what I discussed last night in that relationship with Jesus. Let us ask ourselves, how can we convert our hearts more to Jesus? And then secondly, let us reflect again, even though we're not perfect, we're not saints now. We're on our way to become saints. And it is possible, dear family. It's possible.